Hello, I'm Craig DeRoche, CEO of Family Policy Alliance. Welcome to the SoCon Report. In a landmark move earlier this month, Melissa McKay and her team at the Digital Childhood Institute filed a sweeping 50-page complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. The complaint accuses Apple of endangering children through deceptive App Store practices. That's a pretty big deal. I hope you sit through this podcast today. Concerns include marketing explicit content to minors, enabling data collection without parental consent, and billing parents for unauthorized app purchases. I'm just going to stop right there and say yes, yes, and yes. As a parent with years spent advocating the child safety in the digital world, Melissa is leading this fight and recently featured on Fox News and across major media. Melissa is the mother of 5, and she's one of the nation's most prominent, persistent voices for online child safety. What started as a worried mom trying to protect the children quickly grew into a national movement. Melissa organized the first campaigns to demand App Store accountability, and we're just starting to get traction right now, but she played a huge role at folks and working through the family policy councils that we host in the Utah App Store Accountability Act of 2025. Melissa, it's such a privilege to have you on the show because you're somebody who has just already done so much that you've taken on the biggies. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so walk us through the major violations. I want to start there, make sure people know they're on the right podcast here. Talk about the major violations that you believe Apple should be held accountable for.
Sure. There's 5 major violations, and we just hit the big ones. Apple has been one of the worst players in this space for a decade now, and they probably get the least amount of attention. I think that Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok get a lot of the airtime for bad actors, but I don't think people realize that Apple is among the worst of the bad actors when it comes to child safety. The first violation is knowingly marketing harmful or age-restricted apps as safe for kids. So when developers go to rate their apps, they get to self-rate them. It's not like movies or video games where there's a third-party group who decides what they should be rated. Developers will fill out a form, and they're basically saying, we think we should be rated safe for a 12-year-old. And we have infrequent or mild sexual content, whether that's true or not. And nobody is holding them accountable. So you get things like VPNs rated safe for 4-year-olds. We have Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok rated as safe for 12-year-olds. And even when we've had huge groundswell of grassroots movements like attorney general's letters or lawsuits, Apple refuses to fix the age ratings and the developers refuse to fix the age ratings. So the first violation is the deceptive advertising as in regard to the app age ratings. The second one is deceptive claims that they make about their own parental controls. If you've ever gone to apple.com/families, they make a whole lot of really huge, verbose, false claims about how safe their parental controls are. They say things like, we want what's best for your family, things like we provide safe parental controls when they really don't. And this is something I've been working on for almost a decade, is testing and trying to get them to improve their parental controls. Because right now they take about 20 steps to set up and they're still full of loopholes and backdoors. And so the average parent is not going to be able to protect their kid on a smartphone. The third one is unfair trade practices relating to contracting with minors. This is the click-wrap agreements that kids sign when they download an app. They're agreeing to these are usually like 50,000 words of legal, very complex agreements, giving away access to their phones, their cameras, microphones, exact locations. Fourth is violations of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And last is violations of the 2014 consent decree for in-app purchases.
So a little bit. And folks, that's pernicious. That's aggressive. There's this story during COVID where they said, if you're not paying for your product, you're the product, right? That's for like the Facebook and the TikTok people that put you on as advertisers. But with Apple, we buy the product from them. They claim to respect who we are as their customer and that they're going to provide us privacy until they get this weird idea that our children are autonomous adults that have this legal standing. Now, Melissa, you just gave some very specific stuff in what you've done. One of the questions that I have, and this is specifically to you, saying you spent a lot of time going to these folks, and so have we. Is Apple given any good reason for why they're really good at keeping some of their stuff away from kids, but other stuff they seem to make it super hard to prevent your kids from seeing it.
Yeah, well, it's really profit driven, and they'll kind of run you in a circle with different reasons why they can do things and they can't do other things. But basically, it comes down to the fact that the profit and incentive structure right now is entirely driven a lot of by these teenagers, the 13 to 18-year-olds that they want complete access to. They redefine the word adult online to mean a 13-year-old. So they believe 13-year-olds can sign contracts, make in-app purchases, do all of these things that would never be acceptable in a brick and mortar scenario or in the real world. But it's simply because of incentives, and they'll say whatever they need to keep that.
And those, I joke, I'm from Detroit, and we were very aware of like a lot of union laws and a lot of the post-industrial protections that we had in America. And I joke and say the 11-year-old Chinese kids making my iPhone are doing a really good job. But in America, we don't want to protect. We want to protect kids here, but then we want to put them into these awful trades everywhere else so we can maintain our lifestyle. And then when it comes to our own kids, we don't want to look into these things. And one of the biggest complaints that I have that you're really a leader on, Melissa, that I want you to expand on is other things that we want to protect kids from, say, like alcohol and citizens after it became legal again in America, less than 100 years ago. We said, we're not going to trust the people that manufacture the alcohol to market the alcohol or distribute it, because we know what happens. But here with Apple, for some reason, our policymakers for about 25 years now have said, what's the big deal that they make the iPhone and the App Store? Come on, they say they have a rating system. Isn't it the same human nature probably ran into with like alcohol and other intoxicating drugs or gambling to say, no, that casinos actually can't run the gambling board. You might need like a third party to look into that. Is that finally starting to get some traction with Apple or not?
We hope so with this FTC complaint. Anytime you have a vertical profit structure, which is the person in the middle or the top benefits from deception beneath them. Like, for example, TikTok claiming that they're rated safe for a 12-year-old, you get an extra couple million users looking at ads, buying stuff. Whenever there's that vertical profit structure without any kind of regulation or somebody in between there, you're going to end up with exactly what you talked about, where the alcohol manufacturers are just going to say whatever they need to get the most people hooked. So the reasons behind the App Store Accountability Act and this FTC complaint were exactly to target that thing, to bring in a third party to put some eyes on this stuff and stop the profit fueled machine that we have right now.
For people that are at home and you're listening to the show right now, and you're saying, boy, this is a big deal. And now that you say these things out loud, these are going to be some very large changes in the industry once people pay attention to it. One of them is, and Melissa McKay is with the Digital Alliance here, Institute, that's been advocating to protect the civil rights of our children from this pernicious pornography, to normalize these behaviors that encumber these kids for the rest of their lives, to protect the kids from it. There's a lot of money involved. I think once parents start bringing civil suits up about the 13-year-olds that allegedly signed a contract, isn't that one of the things that Apple is trying to pretend like they could do? Like a bunch of 13-year-olds own like homes and have mortgages. They were like, well, they signed a contract, right? Isn't that one of their defenses? And in our Congress and everybody's been so silly to actually take that seriously. But you showed up there, Melissa. Tell us what's going on with that.
Yeah. So, 20 years ago when Congress passed the Children Online Privacy Protection Act, it was kind of a horrible miscarriage of justice, but people took it way farther than even it should have been taken, where people are saying 13-year-old is the age of internet adulthood. But if you go back and read what the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act actually says, it doesn't say anything about kids having a right to sign contracts or those contracts to be binding. And I think that everyone was just kind of ignoring that fact until I started writing this bill last year and bringing it to the attention that these are not binding contracts. People, some of these trade groups who oppose the bill will say, well, they're revocable. You can revoke the contracts. But the truth is, they know the kid is underage and they treat them as binding immediately. And they start collecting their data, selling their data, and using that data. So if you can imagine that in a brick and mortar scenario, it would be like a young girl coming into a bank and the bank presenting her with a 50-page contract with a foreign investor. And then the bank allows her to sign that and then doesn't tell the foreign investor that it's a child. And that's what Apple and Google are doing right now at scale. So we're trying to bring attention to it and stop it from happening.
And, we're going to do more than draw attention to that. This is one of the interviews that I'm going to really enjoy sending in to some regulators, to the White House, to Apple, and to some other people. And folks, we want you to share this interview with your friends and family too. I'm talking with Melissa McKay right now about one of the most important issues that's facing families. We decided, and I think a lot of this was maybe the baby boomer generation thought pornography and Hugh Hefner was cool dude and a rebel or whatever. But pornography is the foundational thing of what is wrong with all the sexualization in our country. It ensnares people, if that's their thing. My thing was alcohol, into a lifetime of slavery to it. And we're not taking it seriously. We're not holding people accountable. And there's reasons for that, but we need to take action. And I want to talk about that civil liability. We're not going to do, maybe I'll have you back on to talk about that. But what I'll say here is I'm a former Speaker of the House. We work with 40 state groups. And I know a lot of governors that would love, love, love to start transferring some of Apple's wealth to the families that have been afflicted by their harm. And that usually is the best way for people, if you're listening, Apple, for us to get you to pay attention. We're still trying the regulatory too, with the hopes that some of these people have these fancy jobs in DC. And I know the new leadership of the FTC is completely different than it's been over the last decade. What are you hearing there? That's where you filed one of these complaints too.
Yeah, so these are all great points. And just to back up a little bit, we actually started in 2019 with a congressional hearing saying, please notice us. This is a problem. We went on to letters and movements. Finally, out of frustration, wrote the Apps for Accountability Act ourselves. And then, in frustration over them trying to amend and substitute our bill into oblivion, I wrote the FTC complaint just a few months ago. And like you said, this is an entirely different administration. The FTC is extremely receptive. I got a call the day after I filed saying, come and meet with us. So my hope is that they step in, regulate the heck out of these people. Our our federal version of the App Store Accountability Act actually has a yearly certification for all app stores with a parent complaint line. So those of us who are on the front lines, we can actually have our voices heard. Unlike my voice for the last decade, like yelling into the wind, I feel like we need to bring parents and those of us who are fighting this to the front lines to say it's not okay that these apps have porn and gambling and stuff like that rated safe for a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. And hopefully civil suits will come next. If you read the FTC complaint, there's actually tons of fodder in there for lawyers if they wanted to take it.
Glad you're saying that. You're feeding, look, I cast out the bait and you're nibbling on it. That's exactly what I'm complimenting you. And what Melissa is just saying is this is how our groups work together. And I want you guys to hear me on this podcast. Family Policy Alliance is so grateful that we have 40 state organizations that employ over 400 employees right now and raise and spend over $60 million. That does not count our political and electioneering work. That counts our mobilization and our education, our C3 work. And that is why we've been able to have such a difference. Folks, it took us 6 years to get to 25 states that protect girls' sports. We had to override 6 governors, 3 Republican and 3 Democrats. And we finally got to, I think, 25 or 26 states there as well. And when it came to pornography, now, folks, normally I talk about how hard things get, and they're only harder. But this is what I want to say. There's something going on in America right now. There is no dispute about the harms of pornography from the right and the left. There is no difference between secular people and Christians with how we talk about these pernicious advertising and the filth that this stuff is. And so this is an opportunity to go forward. These bills are passing unanimously, and I'm with one of the people that God has used in a special way to get this thing started. So Melissa, now that you've carried this water, you've gone up the hill, your back is full of all these arrows. If you were throwing rocks at your head, but God has used you in such a powerful way. How can we help you today? Tell us about your organization. Tell us about this petition, what we should be doing, knowing that the hour is upon us, maybe to have a generational reform advance.
Yeah, thank you. So there's 2 ways you can help us. You can go to our website at digitalchildhood.com and you can read our FTC complaint and then send it to every lawmaker that you know and lawyer. Let's get some civil suits going, right? And then you can go to appstoreaccountability.com. You can get our model legislation for the App Store Accountability Act and try to get it passed in your state. Right now, it's only been passed in 3 states, Utah, Texas, and Louisiana. So there is still a ton of work to be done here. And just make sure that you get a legislator with a spine of steel because they will be the most popular legislator this session. They're going to have Roblox, AT&T, Comcast, Apple, Google, you name it. Everybody's going to be in their office trying to get a little piece knocked off this bill. So just make sure you pick the right one.
And folks, that's what we do. And we couldn't do that without your support. We would not have the ability to invite people like Melissa on with the digitalchildhoodinstitute.org, the digitalchildhoodinstitute.org. We wouldn't have the privilege of working with folks unless you helped us create a place where we could make a difference, where we don't spin our wheels in the mud, but we come forward with open hearts and open hands and a lot of experience and the blessings of our Lord. And we pray first, and then we vote, and then we engage. And part of that engagement is where we say we want to be a part of this solution. And we're inviting you to do that today. This is nearly unanimous in America of the support for these reforms. This is me asking you, if you haven't shared any of these podcasts, if you haven't said, put me in, coach, I'm ready, this is your issue. You'll find everybody agreeing with you. Help us stand up for our kids. I think even Apple does, but there's so much a corporate thing. I just don't think they can change unless they're asked to, because they would say, I can't reduce the value of our company by $500 billion voluntarily. But I think if we come through the front door, which is what we have the opportunity to do with discussions like this, and say it's time for you to build a business model on building up our next generation rather than putting them on this treadmill to slavery in sexual addiction, we need your help. So please go to the digitalchildhoodinstitute.org, get educated. We're going to push out opportunities for you to sign a petition to support Melissa in this issue. And it's one of the most important things that we could be doing. Melissa, with that, I'm going to give you the last word. Tell us about your hope of the outcome if we get a positive reception in the FTC. What are the types of things you think will come next in our culture and in our news if we can get some traction? We have to make noise. What's going to happen if they actually say, you know what, it's time?
Okay, so this is the exciting part. I've been doing device and online safety for almost a decade. And this far in my career, I only focus on the things that are going to make the biggest difference. If we could regulate Apple and Google, the shift in the amount of protection that kids are going to have on their day to day life, just rating the apps correctly, fixing the parental controls, making it more streamlined, it is going to be night and day. If you are going to pick one issue and one bill, this is going to make the biggest difference out of everything. Because what should be happening right now, because every smartphone collects the child's age, all the parent should have to do is put in their child's age, and every setting on the smartphone should default to safety for those child. So if the child is 8 or if they're 10 or if they're 14, that's all the parent should have to do. For a trillion-dollar company, that's not a lot to ask. And then our kids would be protected online. The vast majority of kids, 90% of kids, have an iPhone, and the vast majority of their time is spent in apps, 90% of the time. So if this passes, we will be protecting the vast majority of kids 90% of the time. So I would just say, best case scenario, we're going to completely flip the script on everything we've been dealing with for the last 10, 20 years. And companies will start prioritizing children and their safety, and our kids won't have to deal with the kinds of stuff that the last generation dealt with, the pornography addiction, the access to addictive content as much. And I'm hoping we get a huge FTC fine. I mean, that would be great. And then regulation for the rest of their lives. So that's the big hope.
Well, Melissa, from your mouth to God's ears, because I don't invoke retribution much. I'm a student of my old boss, Chuck Colson, and restorative justice. And that will come when they begin taking accountability for this and ask the question of restorative justice. How can I make amends for this? There's a lot of good that people like Apple could do, but it starts with us holding them accountable. It's been a joy and a privilege to have you on. And know that our movement is going to mobilize on this, and we're going to press this through. Our kids are worth it. Thank you for being with us, Melissa, and to our audience. Until next week, blessings.
Thank you so much.